All right. Hey guys, how's it going? So in this one, what I want to do is this is something that I do in a lot of the apps that I build, and I find that this helps me to identify like any potential bottlenecks, and that's just to introduce a logger so that I can find just anything that's taking a lot of time. As you can see, when we first started the app, we do have some that are taking a long time, like 9 seconds, but we have caching in our app, remember. So if we reload the page, then you'll see now initial data load took 0 0.1 seconds instead of 9 seconds. So this is just an example of something that you can do to, again, find any potential bottlenecks. So let's get into it. Logger, you'll probably end up finding this. And so this is, if you read it, it says it's their internal logger. So as far as I know, it's not really like exactly what we're looking for, so we'll still want to set up our own logger, but still we should it's still interesting to see what happens. So if I paste this in here, and then in this terminal I'll do make front end, so I'm using the make file, and then in here if I do make backend, just to make sure that that's up and running. And then, so you'll already see we're getting some debug information in here. And so if we make any sort of change, like if we say just change the stock string, then it'll say like exactly what files that it's looking for. So that is kind of a useful thing because Streamlit does have Watchdog in the background. So they will be watching for changes in certain files. So if you are running into an issue, it is kind of useful to have, but as I said before, like this isn't really what we're looking for. All right, so to get our logging system working, what I do want to first do is in the utils folder here, I want to create an actual logger file. So this is going to house everything like our formatting and everything like that, which I like to just have that isolated out. So we'll call it, uh, we'll just call it logger.py. Then I'll paste this code in here. So we're importing the logging function. And then what we're doing is we have a separate function to actually set up the logger that we're using, and we have the formatter that we want, and everything like that. And then we have a function that is just designed to actually get the logger, um, just a setter and getter methodology. And then we have an actual logger object down here, which is just going to basically call the method. And this is what we're going to want to import into our other files. Just an important note too, notice that when we're setting up the logging function, we are making a handler and we're making a stream handler. Now the reason that we're doing this is because when we run in Docker later on, Docker is only going to give us the logs on the actual console. So if we're using like Dozzle or something like that to actually view the logs, then we're going to want to have this just output to the stream so we can view it there. Right, so for the next part of the code, let me paste it in here and then I'll explain it. Okay, we just need a few imports at the top too. We need to get time context manager. I'll explain that in a second. And then to import the actual logger that we have. So we'll just scroll up to the top of the file, just paste that in here, and then rough will organize it all for us. And so, okay, come back down here. The squiggles are all gone. Okay, so what we're doing is this is something called a context manager. So you may have, I'm sure you've probably seen something like this before. So if we have like, I'll just use some pseudocode here. Um, with uh, file.txt as file, and then, yeah, we do something like that. I think it's, oh yeah, it's open. Okay. So here's a context manager right here. So it is with this with statement right here, which is, I'm sure, what you've seen before. So we can normally just open up this file separately, without using the with keyword. So like this. But when we do that and then execute our code underneath, then we need to, yeah, something like that. We need to actually close it manually. And a lot of times there's, maybe there's an exception that occurs in this block of code. So then the close doesn't get executed. So then your file is just left open. By using the with keyword, we're basically having our context manager handle this. So it opens the file and then it executes everything in here, and whether or not it runs into an exception, it'll automatically close the file when it's finished. So that's kind of like what a context manager is. Now, what we can do is we can actually make our own context manager by importing context manager from contextlib, which is part of the standard library. And that's what we're going to use here. And that requires us to have a generator function. Now, if you're not familiar with generator functions, essentially what they do as opposed to regular functions is regular functions are like this. They're just going to run and then execute whatever code it is and then return back a value. A generator instead will return an actual generator object. And so when you call the next keyword with it, it'll execute everything up until the yield, and then when you call next again after that, then it'll execute everything after the yield statement. So to help explain the usefulness, I think what we'll do is this is how we would do it manually. So we'd say like time start, and then time. Yeah, that needs to be in brackets too. And then we would print here time end. So anyway, we're not actually coding that part. But basically this is what we do. So we print the time that it starts, and for time end, we'll just pretend we put this into a variable, and then we would actually do time.time minus when the time started. So we'd have to do two print statements like that, and it would get kind of messy to go through functions and just put in like random print statements and stuff. Instead, what's a lot cleaner is to actually be able to use the syntax. So this should be simple. We'll just say with helpers.timer. Exactly. IntelliSense already knows. And then tab that in. Okay. So how this is working, and this is why the context manager actually requires a generator function, is when the with keyword is called, it executes up until our first yield. Now, you'll notice we're not actually yielding anything. We could yield, I don't know, some kind of random variable. And how that's useful is if we have, like, as object or something like that, and then want to perform something based on that object. For our use case, we don't need that. All we want to do is just print the time. So what's happening is when you initially set up that with statement, then it's going up until this first yield, and then in the finally block here, which executes whether or not this passes, which obviously it's going to, then it will print the elapsed time here. So it'll say the name, which is whatever it was. We're using operation as default, but here we're overriding that. So this becomes the name loading athlete data from backend. So it executes when everything in the with statement finishes executing, then it prints out how long that it took. All right, so to save time, I've just gone through and put in a couple more with statements. So we've got our load athlete data from API that was backend to API before, but I just copy and pasted some stuff. We have the actual loading of the athlete. We want to get that. The actual cleaning action, we definitely want to time that to see how long it takes. That'll be very interesting. The scatter plot, and then all the histogram stuff. And then also on dashboard.py, we want the initial data load, which should only happen once, I believe, because of the caching. And then how long it takes to actually prepare the download. So this will help identify potential bottlenecks. Okay, so now let's take a look at how this works in practice. So I have the app up here. I just reloaded it. Let me just refresh it. It'll take a bit the first time because it works on getting all the data. Okay. And you start seeing the logs appear down here. So you'll see when it first comes up, the initial data load took about 11 seconds, which is rough. But if we just go over here and refresh the page, see now it's cached, so it takes a lot shorter of a time, 0.2 seconds. All right, so now we have our basic logger working. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.